Hello, and welcome to the Embrace Balance, Discover Joy podcast. I'm Amanda Butland, your host and intuitive life coach.
All right. Well, welcome to another episode of the Embrace Balance Discover Joy podcast. Today, my special guest is Jasmyn Quianna. Jasmyn is the author of Falling Madly in Self-Love and the founder of the Absolute Self-Love Movement. Jasmyn, it's so great to have you with me today.
Thank you, Amanda, for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm excited to chat with you. But before we start, I always like to start with my little icebreaker question that I ask all of my guests. Would you mind sharing with us what activity or hobby brings you the most joy and why?
I'm gonna go with swimming. We joked about this a little bit before, but is it just one? I'm gonna go with swimming because I like to just be in water. It's something about water that it's very relaxing, it's calming, even though it can be rough, like in the ocean and stuff, water can be rough. But it can, especially when you go underwater and it's like it's sound but no sound, and it's like I don't know, it carries you, it holds you, but at the same time, it's like inside of us, we're made mostly of water. We need water to live. It's like I don't know, water for me is just like my calm, peaceful place. But at the same time, I also use it for exercising and working out because I'll swim laps. So it's like water is my like all of the above.
Oh, I love that. I love what how you just described sort of like being in the water and sort of like the sound but no sound because I mean, I don't love swimming myself, but I do love being near water or on water. So, I totally get like just being and I love like you said like the ocean can be a little bit rough, like especially for swimming, but I love actually being on the water. It's like one of my favorite things, like
Mm-hmm.
to do. So I feel like when you're on a boat or a ship and just that rocking is so calming. So anyways, I know some people have like motion like seasickness, but I'm like I love being on water.
Right? It's the best.
Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and dive right in. And so I did mention a couple of things at the beginning when I introduced you that you are an author and you're also a founder of a movement. But before we like really get into that, I would love to hear maybe a little bit about your journey. Like what brought you here? How did you get to where you are publishing the book and then starting this movement?
So thank you. That's a great question. And essentially, to give everybody the long story short version, I started out on like the science, clinical research, finding new drugs, clinical trials side of things. That's what I spent almost 2 decades essentially building my career in. I got, multiple degrees and climbed the clinical research corporate ladder and like pharma and biotech companies and checked all of those boxes, got the roles, the titles, the promotions, the perks, the salaries, literally just kind of, built myself up, my career up, starting from the bottom because it was that in and of itself was a rough journey. Literally going from broke and pregnant and having to move into my mom's basement before I got evicted and no job. And this was all with like multiple degrees and having done everything right. I went from there to saying, I'm never going to be in this place again. So I have to work super hard, climb this ladder and get out of this miserable place. And so I did all the things. I climbed the ladder. I got to where I thought was success and where I was going. And I was more miserable than I was when I was broke and in the basement with all the debt on government assistance. I felt worse than even then. So it was like my mind started to then, start asking these questions like, well, what's going on? What happened? Is something wrong with me? Why? All the things because I have been traveling this path. They tell us this is the American dream. Do these things, you'll be successful. And I just felt like this is not what success is supposed to feel like with all of the burnout and the overwhelm and the stress and, exchanging time for money and no time to spend with your family and no time to even spend with yourself and just breathe. And it was just constant like, you did all the things, but you're constantly hustling, bustling, grinding to hold on to it and to manage and maintain and stay where that was. So I was like, this is definitely not going to be sustainable for the next, 10, 20, 30 years. This is not it. And then I started to feel at least before, I felt like there was a little bit of passion left, because my whole career, I just wanted to do something that helps people heal. But even that started to die, and I felt disconnected even with that side of things. So that's when I knew like my soul was talking louder and louder, and I had to do something different. I originally tried or pivoted into career coaching, but for the same space, so in the clinical research space. And I was building that business alongside my, corporate career, thinking that would be my exit strategy. And even then, with that business, I reached another place of burnout and disconnection and overwhelm and unfulfillment. And it all boiled down to essentially me trying to follow the logical, rational path, the path that made sense, the path that was safe, the path that I could explain, that had the prestige and like, all the things behind it to say it's gonna be successful, or it should be successful anyways, because others have done it. This is what success looks like. And that wasn't the case for me. And then the more I talked to friends and family and even people that I was career coaching at the time, um, networking with people, I found out I wasn't the only one. It seems like almost the world was in the same space and place. So that's when I started to really go within. I was grew up religious, but I wouldn't say I was truly spiritual. Didn't have like, it's like the religion has all the rules and the control and all the things, but I didn't allow myself to be free and exploring like what does it actually mean? What does God actually mean? And how does that relate to us? And all the things spiritual related. That's when I started asking like questions. I had a whole meltdown breakdown at work, multiple, and I started asking, who are we? What are we? There has to be more, like, all those questions that come up. And then that's when all the downloads started coming through for these different self-love pillars and self-love. And, it's going back to you don't love yourself. Eventually, um, I sort of realized it was like this self-hate wound that was kind of the source of all the things that was, keeping the burnout going. And that's really what it was, me abandoning myself, rejecting myself, all of those things. And I sort of kind of, as these self-love pillars and all the things started to come to me, so did the idea of the book. It was a lot of resistance. It definitely was not my thing or what I thought I would be doing. Didn't make any sense financially. It was totally like, you know, this is not, on the surface anyways, this is not the path, this isn't it. But it was the first time that my soul, I could feel on the inside. It was it was like a pull or calling, so to speak. But the human, the external, like everything that I knew, being the high achiever, always performing, proving, that was a part of my identity. It just seemed so far-fetched. But eventually I surrendered, just because my soul, my body was breaking down. I had enough. And I started listening to my intuition, my guidance. And eventually I wrote the book. Not a trained author, didn't have anything of this in mind, definitely not about self-love. And then started building a business and an ecosystem around it. And that's what led to the absolute self-love movement, essentially.
Wow, thank you for sharing that story. I love sort of where you started and where you ended up, and I always love hearing sort of these like awakening stories, right? Because it's sort of like I like what you said around how you surrendered to what you were receiving, even though it didn't maybe make logical sense, because there often is that resistance, right? It's like, well, this doesn't make sense. Is this gonna really like support me? But but you had that calling, and and then you actually did it. So that is amazing. Um, so congrats on the book, and that's amazing. And so now, I'd really love to sort of dive into sort of what the absolute self movement is all about, because I know you said you built it around the book and what's in the book. Um, and I love what you sort of said around how you had to transition out of that self-hate, because that was sort of at the base of it, and now you've got like the self-love movement. Would you mind talking a little bit about more about what the absolute self movement is, with
Hmm.
us?
Absolutely. So essentially, I feel like, especially, and not that we haven't had hard times throughout history before, but it seems like the hate thing, and not that it has ever went away, but it seems to be spewing back up, let's just say. So I feel like at a times like this, the world just needs more love in general. And specifically when, we're talking about creating lives that we actually like, that light us up, that dream lives, basically. Um, for me, I discovered throughout my journey that absolute self-love and falling madly in love, self-love with yourself is the secret to having it all and manifesting your dream life. Simply because it's not something tangible or external that you're trying to earn or prove or get. Self-love, absolute self-love is who you are. It's a frequency, it's a vibe, it's a way of life. And in absolute self-love, it's combined essentially of the 12 absolute self-love pillars that's in my book. That's the framework. And as you collect and embody and practice, because it's not a perfect thing. It's not like you're gonna always, be compassionate with yourself or celebrate yourself, for example. It's like an up and down thing, right? But it's just about being aware, most importantly, and practicing, as much as you can. And when you fall short, awareness and just coming back, gently returning back to what you know to be true for yourself. But it's essentially about embodying, living these principles, the 12 pillars. And as you practice them on a daily basis, you automatically put yourself in this absolute self-love space and frequency. So not only are you sending out signals to God, the universe, the world saying, hey, I want more of this, which will return to you, you're also sending that out for others as well, which creates this ripple effect across the entire human collective, right? So it's not only sending love to yourself, but by default, it's automatically putting it out towards others. So it's essentially making life better for us all. That's at its core, big picture, what the absolute self-love movement is about.
Oh, I love what you said around sort of that ripple out to others because you're right. When you change yourself, it's not just you that's impacted, like everybody that you interact with, right? Because you're
Everybody.
spreading that your energy, whatever it is that you've shifted in yourself, interacting with others. It is definitely spreading that. And so I love sort of like how you describe sort of that the ripple effect and how it'll continue to wave out and just generate more and more as you interact with more people and just spreading that throughout the world. Because you're right. I mean, right now in the world, there's probably a lot more of love that's needed out there, especially right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, I sort of love how you sort of describe this, the pillars, right? You have these pillars in your book. That's the basis of the movement. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind maybe sharing just one of them with our audience to just give us a little bit of a taste of maybe one of them. Would you be willing to do that?
Oh, of course. And I don't mind if you want, we can very quickly go through the 12. I could,
Oh.
it's totally up to you.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if you want to just go high level over all 12, that would be amazing. I would love to hear that. And then, if people are interested in diving deeper, then they'll have the resources in the show notes to find your book and your all of your stuff.
Right. And then also, I am sharing, like I told you, I have a free gift for the audience. It's the first chapter, including the intro. And then the first chapter also has a practice and everything. So they'll get that and be able to, see for themselves as well. But so the first pillar is self-realization. And that's and like you said, a high level overview. So it's essentially realizing who and what we truly are as divinity and form, not just on a human level, but in a soul level, like who we actually are and the power we hold as divine creators, limitless creators. So that's the first one, self-realization, and then self-awareness, which I kind of brought up, gaining awareness over your thoughts, and that your thoughts have power. They're creating your reality. And then after that is self honesty, I believe. And then that just speaks for itself, but not on a in a surface level type of way of honesty. Going deep below the surface and allowing yourself to truly like get into the painful, which you never wanted to admit to anybody, not even yourself, level of honesty. Which having those first two pillars first it allows you to reach that level of honesty because you're coming from that place of realizing who you are. No shame, no guilt, no judgment, criticism. It's just more so a reflection, which self-reflection is also another pillar, so that you can be able to trace, the past, not again from a place of shame, judgment, criticism, but strictly pattern recognition, habit recognition, so that you can then, collect the data essentially and then say, okay, this is what I've been doing, this is where it's coming from, and then you can now choose differently. Did I say self-accountability?
No, not yet.
I don't think so. Okay. Self-accountability is the next one. Because going, all of these things, the pillars that come before that, if you aren't holding yourself accountable to that level of honesty or to that level of awareness, or reflecting judgment free, then you can't really take any action or move forward, with all the things that you've now learned about yourself, right? If you're not holding yourself accountable to that new standard. And then self-compassion is one, which kind of also speaks for itself, right? Especially people that are ambitious or high achieving or high performing types of people, especially more so even women, we have a hard time extending compassion to ourselves. And it's like a no. It's like, especially me coming from a religious background, sometimes it's also a part of like pride or ego, like, you don't, or it might make you weak if you, or too soft if you extend too much compassion, right? But that's really kind of like the gate or the door, the key to unlocking it all, because the shame, the guilt, the criticism is essentially what's keeping us stuck and keeping us from moving forward into the life that we actually want to create. And then the compassion allows you to step into self-forgiveness, which is the next pillar, because you cannot move forward if you're still constantly, judging, criticizing, blaming yourself for all of the experiences that you have, which is really no one's fault. It's just an experience. We take the lessons, we learn, we grow. Everything's happening for you, and we move forward. And then after that is self-trust, which is more so leaning into your intuition, your inner guidance coming from the God within, as we are all divinity informed, going back to that first pillar of self-realization. And then self-belief is the next pillar. And that's more so believing in yourself, independent of having that external proof that, whatever you're thinking or dreaming or envisioning is actually real or makes sense or is the next step. But essentially believing in the identity before you have the evidence to back it up and support it. And then after self-belief, I believe is self-devotion, I think. Self-devotion. Self-devotion is made up of self-care, self-trust, and self-attention. Self-care, I feel like is kind of the new wave of what people see self-love to be. Typically, you'll hear self-care, self-worth, self-value, maybe even self-image, a little bit of self-trust. But I felt like self-care is definitely an essential component to falling madly in love with yourself. But it's only a small component when it comes to being devoted versus disciplined. I feel like discipline is something that comes from that place of like always performing, achieving. Like it's a very structured, I guess, rigid type of space versus devotion really comes from a more compassionate, forgiving, less, not without the judgment, the criticism. It's more so a decision that you consciously made to commit to something versus feeling like you're forcing yourself to do things because you have to be, disciplined. And then after self-devotion is self-companionship. We often talk about what type of friends we are to others, family, partners, all the people, right? Friends, but never to ourselves. And it's very challenging to create a life that you're in love with when you aren't best friends and really truly know the person that has to live that life, which is yourself. So how are you going to create something for someone who you don't even really deeply know? So that's where the self-companionship one comes from. And then self-celebration is the last one. Um, we oftentimes are taught in many traditions, cultures that, again, going back to the pride thing, the ego thing, you can't celebrate yourself, especially not too much, especially not in public or openly. You don't want to shine too bright or, come off as arrogant or, all the things, right? But it's not about any of that. It's just an extension really of gratitude. And gratitude is that kind of like the engine behind manifesting anything that you desire. But it's really being grateful for all the, not just the big things, but the little things, like waking up this morning, showing up on this podcast, us having this conversation, connecting, like all of those are wins. All of those are things to be celebrated, but we're not really taught to, see life that way, right? It has to be something that we achieved or performed well at to say we can celebrate it. So it's really starting to retrain your brain and rewire the way we think about what actually needs to be truly celebrated, and realizing that us just being here present, living, being ourselves is truly something to be celebrated. So that's essentially all of them in a nutshell.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for going through all of that. I love that. And as you went, there were a couple that really stood out for me. And when you were talking about the devotion and sort of the definition of what that is, because you're right, it is a lot softer. And I can't even remember what the other word that you said, discipline, in comparison, because they're super, super different. But the way that you describe sort of that devotion, so much more softer and more compassion towards yourself, and then that last piece around celebration and gratitude, because I love what you talked about, how gratitude, it's not just the big things, it's the little things,
Little
right? Because I
things.
think oftentimes people think that it's got to be a big win, that's what you need to be celebrating or having gratitude towards. But it really is like the little everyday things. And sometimes it's not even positive things. It could be just gratitude for a challenge, right? Like something that
Yeah,
was negative, but like you learned from it and you grew from it. And to have gratitude for something even negative, right? Like how
absolutely.
impactful that can be.
Yes, that's a great point. Definitely. You think it's negative, but having gratitude for something like even me sharing my story and all the things of the past, definitely before I went on this journey, I was not grateful and did not celebrate any of that stuff at all. It was things I was trying to forget and not really bring up. But going through this path, reflecting from an honest, compassionate space, it did allow me to then celebrate and congratulate and even thank myself for going through the experience and making it to the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, if you didn't have that, right, that challenge, then you would have probably been happy just continuing to live that life and
Exactly.
not ended up where you were today, where you've, developed this process, this movement, and just learned so much and grown and, now in love with yourself versus where you were before.
Right.
Um, right? Because oftentimes, you need those challenges to overcome in order to get to the, like you said, the other side.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was about to say it's unfortunate. I guess maybe it's not unfortunate, but we really, most of us anyways, myself specifically, won't move until something starts screaming at us and it gets super uncomfortable. So you're right. So right.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, just what you just said about like uncomfortableness, right? It's sort of like that. Just to talk about comfort zone for a little bit, because you mentioned it, and I'm like, oh, I like to talk about comfort zone.
That's your thing.
Because, there's so many people that are just happy to stay in that comfort zone and not step out of it and get to a different, that, like you said, the other side, like get to a place of growth, because they're just so comfortable. And I don't know if you want to talk about like how to just shift, how to get out of that comfort zone, like how to get to a feeling of like it's okay to be uncomfortable in order to get to that place of growth.
So that's an interesting question because number one, I guess it feels like um you do have to get super uncomfortable, like that screaming uncomfortable, in order for you to even say, okay, I'm gonna do something about it. Because like you said, you essentially start getting comfortable being uncomfortable. You don't even recognize it. It's like a fish in water, right? Like what's water to a fish? Um, so it's really hard, first of all, to even gain that level of awareness. So if you even have the level of awareness that something's off, even if you can't really name it, but just something's off, that in and of itself is like that's a win. That's something to be celebrated. But how to get out of that space once you have like an inkling of something's off, even if it's not screaming loud, but like, there could be a little bit more or something's just there's just something missing, right? Like a gap. The first step that I took anyways was thinking about all the things from my past, which is where the reflection and stuff comes in, and honesty, thinking about all the things in my past that I had overcome, because whether we like to admit it or not, we've all overcome something in our lives. It doesn't have to be climbing Mount Everest or, like you said, this huge major thing, but you've done something that, at some place you felt stuck or was hard or a challenge that you overcame. So going back to that place or places, if you have more than one, and thinking about the before versus the after, and how you felt specifically before and how you felt specifically after, and the cost of what was the stuck place, whatever that was for you, that cost associated with staying in that comfortable place versus the reward that you gained after you made the choice or the decision, whatever it was, to shift and get out of that place. And just taking that one specific example and comparing and seeing typically does enough for you to see, okay, if this happened in this one example, then this could be possible for my place now. So that being at least a little bit of enough to make you feel at least a little bit safe to start entertaining it and thinking about what does change look like now, even though I know it's gonna require me to get uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful advice. Thank you. All right. I do want to start to wrap up. We've had a really great conversation. And thank you so much again for sharing your pillars because I just love all of them. And, like I mentioned, for people that want to, learn more and dive deeper, all the links to find your book and the free gift of your chapter will be in the show notes, so people will be able to find that. But before we wrap up, I did want to just open it up for one last question for you. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today? Any special words of wisdom or anything, any call to action you'd like to put out there?
I would say the last thing I would leave everybody with is really to start thinking about self-love and absolute self-love specifically, because I do want to create a distinction between like the self-love movement that's kind of happening now versus absolute, because it really is founded in those pillars, and I want to make it clear it's like it's not something soft or weak. Going into that type of work with yourself, it's rough. So it's definitely not, if anything, I feel like that is like a journey for the brave and the courageous, right? Versus a weak, soft thing. Um, but I really want people to start thinking about absolute self-love as a way of life, as a frequency, as a way of being, and really sort of the new strategy for all the other, or at least the umbrella strategy for all the other strategies of things that they may have going on in their life, whether it's their career, parenting, friendships, health, personal health, whatever. You can literally apply it to every single situation if you start from that place of absolute self-love and seeing it as the strategy for everything in your life. Then everything starts to flow a lot more, easily. I'm not going to say it's gonna be easy, but definitely flows with ease. And it's a lot more connection, and there's it's it fills the gap, at least for me. It filled a gap, a void that I didn't even truly realize that I had. So now in every other area of my life, all the ones that I just named, for example, even finances, you can say, it just takes you to a different space frequency when you're navigating these areas so that you can now show up and live as your fullest, brightest self, whatever that is, whatever that may be that you're doing. So I would really like to, I guess, the main takeaway is for people to start thinking about absolute self-love as a strategy, a frequency, a way of life, and just, I guess more so importantly, realizing that we can't build the life of our dreams, while abandoning, neglecting, abusing, rejecting the one who has to live it, which is ourselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, you're right. And that's the thing that people always talk about with and I know this is like more like lower like generic, but like they always say like with self-care, right? It's like you got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you
Right.
put the others on, right?
That's a good one.
That's sort of the basis of it, right? But like the much more expanded in what you've put together in your movement and your pillars in your book, around how it's so important to focus on yourself and get to a place of goodness within yourself and loving yourself, being madly in love with yourself in order to like you said, started at the beginning with like is then rippling that out to everybody else around you and sort of spreading that. So thank you
Yes.
so much.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for having me. It's been so much
Yeah.
fun.
I invite you to subscribe to the Embrace Balance Discover Joy podcast and join our community. If you feel inspired by what you hear, please leave a review and share this podcast with others who might benefit. And remember, it's never too late to embrace balance and discover joy in your life. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes filled with inspiring stories and valuable insights. Until next time, take care and be kind to yourself.